topic, so you can join on September 16. Related to today's session, we have done one session in past. That's on FinOps on Microsoft Azure by Martin, and this session is also recording is available on our YouTube channel. So you can, if you are interested, you can go and take a look. And we are also doing a few sessions on data community. So this session is going to happen on September 9. It's automatic query tuning with the Microsoft SQL Server and data factory, no-code data preparation for modern data warehouse. So if you're interested in any of the topic, you can join there. This is our YouTube channel. With today's session recording and previous session recordings will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you are interested, please go and take a look. And we have done some Chartburst sessions in past with John Saville, Donovan Brown, and Stock Hanselman. So you can just go and take a look. All these session recordings are available on our YouTube channel. And before hand over to Wim, there are a few reminders. Please keep yourself on mute. And if you have any questions, please use the raise hand feature. And this session is being recorded. If you like, please spread the words on our social media. So yeah, over to you, Wim.
Can you share that I can share my deck, because I'm still not able. So that's the only thing missing at the moment, and then I can take off.
Yeah, just give me a moment. I think
Yeah.
I'll make it center.
Yeah.
And let me make Rahul also at the center.
I should be able to. Yeah, so my screen should be showing, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, we can see. Great.
Okay. So I do it like this. So hello everyone, welcome, and thanks for joining. I think with the session title, it's quite clear which topic I will be talking about. And I really hope that I will learn you some new tips, tricks, and things which you can follow and which you can save you some money at the end of the month when you need to pay your Azure bill. Before going through the agenda, first of all, I want to thank Asif and Kulesh and the other organizers and everybody else involved for setting up this meetup and for allowing me to deliver this talk. Let me also shortly introduce myself. My name is Wim Matthijssen. I live in Belgium, where I work as an Azure technical advisor at a company called Proximus. As a Microsoft certified trainer, I also deliver all kinds of Azure workshops and trainings. Community-wise, I'm a founding board member of a Belgium user group, like you can see on the slide, called MC2MC, which stands for Microsoft Cloud and Client Management Community. And we mainly focus on Azure and Microsoft 365, but we also keep an eye on security, Hyper-V, and even, these days a complete Windows Server landscape, especially with the release of Windows Server 2022. Next to that, I also have my own blog, https://wmatthijssen.com. Like already said, I'm also a Microsoft MVP, Azure MVP, which still is a huge honor. I'm also on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you ever want to reach out, ask a question about Azure or your Azure Cloud Sp, or even if you just want to say hi, you can always contact me through my Twitter handle @wmatthijssen or LinkedIn, or you can even simply scan the QR code at the bottom of the slide. So on the agenda this evening, depending of where you're located, of course, first I will briefly talk and look at on how you can understand what your Azure costs are and how a good design and estimation of those costs can help you on your way to save some money. Then I will talk about how you can optimize your Azure environment to lower your costs. Of course, I will also show some demos in between. And in the last part, I will look into how you can remain informed and in control of your costs. At the end, I will also go through some key takeaways to really focus on 5 things I think you should remember about this session. And of course, completely at the end, there's probably still some time for a Q&A where I would love to answer any of your questions. So let's go ahead, and to get started, let me use a quote of Tom Cruise, something I couldn't live out as a movie lover, show me the money. So let's go ahead. So managing your cloud spend across your organization definitely is an important part of your and everyone's Azure cloud journey as a company. And you can actually split this up into three parts. First of all, it's important that you understand what your Azure costs are, and to know that a good estimation of those costs can really help you on your way. Then when you're up and running and you're using all kind of Azure resources, it's time to optimize your environment so that you're able to lower those costs, which can help you to deliver more with a given budget. Then as third part, you should control and analyze your costs. So you can, for example, make departments or even teams accountable for the use of their Azure resources. So let us first look in how you can learn to better understand your costs. And to get started, it's good to know that with the use of cloud-based applications and workloads, like any Azure services or resources, companies shift from a capital expense, a CapEx model, like they say, into an operational expense, an OpEx model, removing them from any hefty upfront investment and replacing those with a consumption-based, pay-as-you-use, predictable monthly fee. So they kind of switch from a more traditional way where they bought hardware and other peripherals like servers and printers to a way where they only spend money on services or products when they need them. And there are a lot of things a company need to think about when they look into moving their on-premise resources to Azure during the so-called assessment and design phase. They not only need to check if their business or company is ready to move to the cloud to Azure, but they also need to validate their IT people skill set to see if they have the right skills to support such a cloud or Azure environment. And if they don't, they should work out an Azure learning path with them so that those engineers and even architects can learn those skills and also capture the new way of working. But I think the most important step is choosing the right cloud migration approach. And that's where the 5 R's can help them to see how an on-premises workload or application can or should be migrated to Azure. So first of all, like most of you know probably, you have rehost or lift and shift, where you pick up an on-premises server. Is it a physical server or a VM? Yeah, it really doesn't matter. And just place it in Azure. Yeah, it's not always that simple, but I think everybody gets the picture. Then you also have the option to refactor or re-architect. We're going to rethink your workload before moving it to Azure to make it, for example, more available or scalable. Then you can also revise or, like they say, re-platform your workloads, where you look into migrating this on-premises workload to an Azure PaaS service. Or you can evenly completely rebuild or rewrite your application or replace it with a SaaS application. Just know that depending on which approach you choose as a company for a specific workload, when that workload is finally moved and running in Azure, the monthly cost can be totally different, hopefully, and optimally lower, of course. But you should also keep in mind, and that's something my good friend Carl and myself also mentioned into a lot of our Duo talks, is that there is always a shared responsibility, and this shared responsibility can differ considerably depending on which of the 5 R's you have chosen. Is it IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, or even these days CaaS and FaaS? Just know that there will always be a shared responsibility where Microsoft will manage everything until a certain point, but you as an Azure consumer also will have some responsibility. So definitely keep this in the back of your mind whenever you need to create a high or low level design for any Azure brown or greenfield project. Of course, when making your design, it's also really important to make an estimate about what those new costs will be. And it's always good to know which possible cost savings there will be, of course. And that's where the Azure Pricing Calculator, which is a free tool, you can find the link at the bottom of the slide, can really set you on your way to make a detailed estimate of those initial costs for new Azure deployments or even variations of your existing workloads already running in Azure. You can use this calculator in combination with another resource, like the TCO calculator, the total cost of ownership calculator. It's a tool to estimate cost savings that you can realize by migrating your on-premises workloads to Azure. When you define your workloads, filled in all the assumptions, you can view a report which gives you the savings when moving those workloads to Azure, and this over a specific time frame, like let us say, for example, 5 years. So by using both calculators, you can get a really good idea of what your estimated Azure costs will be. Next to the Azure Pricing and TCO calculator, there are also some other resources that can help you choosing the right cloud migration approach and hopefully in the end save you some money. First of all, you have the Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework, or CAF, which is a collection of documentation that provides you with implementation best practices and tools. And if you're architecting and designing any new cloud workloads or thinking of new Azure use cases, then the Azure Architect Center is also a good resource you can use. Here you can find all kinds of implementation examples, which can guide you in making a good high-level and low-level design. Of course, you can also use Azure Migrate, a resource I myself use a lot during Azure migrations at customer environments. And if you're not sure on how to get started with your cloud migration, you can always check out the Azure Migration Program. Here you can find the right help by asking for guidance, or you can simply contact a migration partner that can assist you. You should also definitely check out enterprise scale architectures, which can help and set you on your way to start with a good foundational landing zone or landing zones. Regardless of whether the applications are being migrated or you're moving new workloads or applications are newly developed and deployed to Azure. In the according GitHub repository, you can find currently 4 reference implementations with different scenarios. So probably one of them will fit your environment. So you can use those and customize them to your own environment and design. And it's an easy way to get started, and this in a well-architected and proper way. Choosing the right subscription type is also an important step in the design process because, like you know, they all have different rates, offers, and even benefits. The ones mostly seen in companies are enterprise or Microsoft customer agreements these days, or the Microsoft Cloud Solution provider, the CSP subscriptions. When you're using one of those, the prices for your Azure resources will differ significantly than when you're just moving or just using a pay-as-you-go subscription. A good thing to know is that you should also know about all your other software licenses, like, for example, those for SQL. Because when you, for example, use an enterprise agreement or a Microsoft customer agreement subscription, you can use an Azure Enterprise Dev Test subscriptions, where you get special rates for some services like VMs and SQL databases. You can then also combine those with running a SQL Server Developer Edition, which is free for use to completely lower the cost of your test environment. The only thing to keep in mind is that whenever you set this up, no production workloads or databases may be used. Otherwise, you don't comply, and if you need to undergo a Microsoft audit, this could lead to you paying a certain amount or a certain penalty. Also good to know is that some services are free for 12 months, and some of them are always free for use, like Azure Advisor or Azure Functions, which have a free monthly amount of 1 million requests, for example. So when you start using them, definitely also check out those specific limitations, because I think it's good to know and to make use of. And then for testing purposes, you should definitely look into Dev Test Labs and Azure Marketplace Test Drive. Azure Dev Test Labs itself allows you to quickly provision development and test environment and does not have an additional cost to use the service. You simply pay for the Windows or Linux VMs used. And test drives are, you can see them as ready-to-go environments that allow you to experience a product for free without needing even an Azure subscription. So you can check those out also. But I will show that in a demo, so it will probably get a little bit more clear. Then there are also a lot of other design decisions that can impact your costs, like selecting the correct storage. And this, not only from a replication perspective, where you have the option between LRS, GRS, ZRS, and even all the read access variants these days, where those last ones are the most expensive. But you also need to ask yourself the question, what you really need from an SLI or uptime perspective. Also know that the choice of the tier and the storage options can make a difference in your monthly cost. Do you really need hot, or can you do it with cold or archive storage? All those choices can make a big difference in your monthly cost. But before you make your choice, also keep all other considerations in mind. Like, for example, know that hot and cold access tiers can be set at account level, and that, for example, the archive tier can be only set at a blob level. So really use them for the right and correct reasons, with looking at everything and not only focusing on the costs. Then, for example, for cost optimizations, you can also look into Azure Blob Storage Lifecycle Management, which offers rule-based policy creations for blob storage accounts. And it will assist you in how the storage is handled over a period of time. For example, you can specify to delete a blob at the end of its life cycle, or switch blobs to cooler storage after, let us say 3 months or so. Then next to the storage optimizations and things you should consider, you can also deploy Azure resources and, for example, VMs into a different regions, which can also save you some money. And this because depending on which Azure region, you deploy your resource, the rate can be lower than when you deploy it in another region. But keep in mind that when you look into this, you should really be aware of your data compliancy and other legacy requirements. I myself mostly use this only for development resources or other resources, but almost never for production workloads. And then, because a lot of companies these days still run Azure EAS VMs, and lift and shift is mostly still one of the first migrations or the first step a company takes when they use Azure resources. I also want to mention some design decisions that can impact your Azure compute costs. Some or most of you will probably know, and some of you will probably know that it all starts with choosing the right VM series and size. But despite that, a lot of people and companies still just do one-to-one translations from their on-premises VMs. And yeah, this not only for the vCPU or vMemory, but also for the attached disks, which then mostly leads to an oversized or over-provisioned VM, which results in unnecessary extra cost at the end of the month. Also, the managed disk option and the availability and SLA options can play an important factor in the monthly cost of a VM. You should know that there is now virtual machine connectivity SLA already for a single VM running with standard HDD disk of 95% or 99.9%, sorry. You should also check out B-series VMs for any workload that isn't that CPU intensive. And also look at Azure Spot VMs for workloads that can be interrupted. Let us say, like, for example, for VMs that do batch processing jobs. Just know then that not every VM size supports Azure Spot. And in the case you deploy Azure Spot virtual machines instances on scale sets, for example, Azure will allocate the instance only if there is capacity available, but there is no SLA for those instances in any way. And next to those, it's always a good idea that when you make your design, that you start thinking beyond the IaaS VMs and try to use a more cloud optimized strategy. You can, for example, look into container instances, AKS, or app service instead of just deploying or lift and shift VMs. The flow chart you can see on the slide, which can also be found in the Azure Architect Center, for example, can really help you setting the right and selecting the right compute service candidate for any of your workloads. So definitely go check that one out also. And a thing I really want to mention is that when you make your design, that you also need to make and understand all the trade-offs. Like there is more security costs more money, and for example, more reliability costs more money, and so on and so on. But let me show a little demo. Okay, there is. I think my Azure portal is showing at the moment. So for example, if you want to use a pricing calculator, I'll already spin it up for the purpose of time. You can simply select whatever project you want to calculate the price for. Just select it. An important thing to keep in mind is if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, over here, you can set your, if you're using euros, dollars, whatever, you can set those. But the thing I also want to mention is you definitely need to look at the licensing program. By default, it's set to Microsoft Online Services Agreement. But for example, if you're a CSP partner, you should log in with your partner account, and then you can set it to CSP, because this will give you the opportunity to set your percentage rates, which will lower the cost for the customer. You can also select dev test pricing. A thing mostly forgotten, a lot forgotten, is to calculate the support. So for example, for the developer, it's around 24 euros. Let me maybe set it in dollars, maybe easier. So if for the developer, it's $29, for example. And the thing I want to mention, for example, if you look into compute options, you can see you can already calculate 1 year reserved, 3 year reserved. You can even switch between Azure Hybrid Benefit. For the managed disks, you can switch between all the options. You can add the snapshots. You can add the transaction rates. So definitely look into, before designing, look into this, use it. It's free to use, and it can really give you a good estimation about a specific cost for a specific Azure-related project. Then you also have that TCO, total cost of ownership calculator. I'm not going to fill it in because it takes some time. You simply open it. You can put all your on-premises workloads in there. You can also upload a specific Excel file. And then you can add all your workloads, either your database or storage, go through the networking. And if you go through all the pages and you fill in all the assumptions, it will give you a nice, clean report. How much everything is going to cost after a period of 5 years, for example. So it's a good calculator you can also start using. And then the thing I also wanted to show you, like I said, some resources are free to use for a specific amount of time, or they have a free monthly amount you can use. If you look at it, the link is over here. Maybe I would put it in the chat also. You can go to those specific resources and see in which ways they are free or for which amount they are free. So like I said, for example, I think I talked about the Azure functions. You can look at Azure functions. I don't find them at the moment. Maybe I need to scroll down. Probably they're at the bottom. So over here, so you can see what it does. It's for the compute, and the free monthly amount, like I showed you on the slide, is 1 million requests, and it's always free. So definitely look into these things also, because it can already save you some money if you know it. Then the Azure Test Drive, simply go into your web browser, go to the Azure Marketplace, log in with your account. In the trials, you just select Test Drive, and then you get a list of all resources you can deploy and test out for free with specific limitations. For example, there are a lot of network virtual appliances you can already test out before deploying them in any test or development environment in Azure. Simply click on it. Everything is well explained, even the plans and the pricings and how long you can use it. So definitely, if you're looking into using new resources in Azure you're not familiar with, and you just want to see, or you need to validate or look at Barracuda versus another provider, for example, just look at it, test it out, and it can really help you and set you on your way. Then also, like I said, you have the enterprise scale landing zones. There's a good GitHub repository, like I showed on the slide, which has all those ARM templates. You can look at the detailed subscriptions, and you can simply click on deploy to Azure, and a complete landing zone is set up. So if you start deploying into Azure and you're making a design and you want to base your design on the enterprise scale architecture in any way, there are 4 at the moment. Just deploy it, look at it, and probably you can take over a lot of their deployment phases, resources, and stuff like that. So it's all related to Microsoft best practices. So definitely go check that one out also. Let me also quickly take control of my Azure portal. I think I want to show you, if you go to storage accounts, you see I have 3 storage accounts at the moment. Let me get to this one, the demo one. And then if we want to use that specific lifecycle management, you just scroll down. Under data management, you can find lifecycle management. I already created a specific rule. So let me open this one. You can see this rule will be applied to all blobs in my storage account, to block blobs and base blobs. And what it will do is, if the base blobs haven't been modified in 90 days, all data will be moved to cold storage. If they're not being modified in 180 days, they will move to archive storage. And if they are not being modified in 300 for a whole year, the blob will be completely deleted. And you can add those rules and change them and add your own rules for specific storage accounts. So really, if you're working with a lot of storage accounts, also look into this, because it's at the end of the month, it can really save you some money. And you can automate it, so you don't need to look at it anymore in a later phase. You set it up, you leave it, you control it, you look at it with Azure Monitor, and follow it up in that way. And probably it will also save you some money. So let me go back to my slide deck. So let us now look how you can optimize your Azure environment to lower costs. Let me quickly take a short drink. So a good way, for example, to lower your IaaS cost is by using Azure Reserved Instances, RIs, where you make a reservation of resources and capacity for either 1 or 3 years. You can also combine RIs with a hybrid use benefit, in which you will use your existing Windows or SQL licenses with software assurance for your Azure VMs or SQL servers running in Azure. And a combination of both can save you up to 82%. You should also know that these days you can use reservations not only for VMs, but also for SQL and for premium SSD managed disks from P30 disks up to P80 disks, but also for Azure Databricks, Azure Cosmos DB. So definitely check those out. And you can, if you don't know what percentage the hub will provide you, you can use the Azure Hybrid Benefit Calculator to see your cost savings when you start using hub. You can fill it in, it will calculate everything, and it will give you your savings. Then you can also use Azure Advisor. It's a free service which will give you personalized best practices to optimize and secure your Azure deployments. It will, for example, advise you about specific cost recommendations and potential cost saving. And Azure Advisor is able to give you those recommendations by analyzing your resource configurations and by using telemetry data that it gathers from various Azure Monitor services. Good to know is that it can do this for all your Azure resources in all your Azure subscriptions, and that those recommendations can be customized so that only recommendations are shown from the subscriptions or resource groups that are most important to you. For example, you can choose to only show recommendations for your Azure production and development subscriptions and not for example, your sandbox subscriptions. And like already being said, when your first migration approach was lift and shift, or you started as a greenfield deployment with IaaS VMs, you should always try to not make it the end state, because I think now it's really the time to start modernizing. For example, like you can see on the slide, you can switch from an IaaS file server to Azure Files later on, or move specific user files to SharePoint Online or OneDrive for Business. Or from an IaaS domain controller, you can move to Azure Domain Server, if it's technical possible, of course, because there are some differences, so really be aware of those before doing this. Or you can also replace your IaaS DNS servers, where you can look into Azure DNS or Azure DNS private zones. And even for people still working with print servers, you can now start using Universal Print to replace them. And of course, there are still a lot of other ways to keep your costs down in Azure. You can delete all unused Azure resources, like, for example, public IP addresses or unattached managed or unmanaged disks. And for example, when your VMs don't need to run 24/7, you should try to start and stop them during the off hours, like, for example, after business hours or in the weekend, because you only pay for the runtime. Expect the storage cost, of course. For this, you can use auto shutdown or automation task. Automation task is currently in preview, so I won't advise it to use it on your production VMs. And you can use both directly from the VM blade, or you can even set up the start-stop virtual machines during off-hour solution in Azure Automation. And because backup is also an important element in every Azure environment these days, and something every environment requires, I also want to mention some tips and tricks to optimize your Azure backup costs. First of all, you can use the Azure backup pricing estimator, which is also an advanced pricing calculator, which can help you to get familiar with your costs related to backup. It will give you an idea on the cost savings you can achieve by, for example, switching to, let us say, a differential backup. Next to that, when you create a new recovery services vault, by default, the GRS replication setting is applied to the vault. While this is a recommended storage replication option for production workloads, you can choose to protect your dev test workloads using LRS. And to achieve this in the mixed environment or Azure subscription, you can set up two different vaults, one for your production workloads with GRS enabled, and the other for dev test workloads with LRS enabled. You can also optimize your backup policies and retentions with, for example, the use of shorter retention durations. And for example, if you're backing up resources that don't exist anymore, you can verify if you still need to retain all backups for those resources and even otherwise clean them up. Because it's quite logic that deleting unnecessary backups can also help you in saving some money on your backup costs. And maybe sometimes you might only require the protection of certain VM data disks and not the entire VM if you're backing up EAS VMs with Azure Backup. And now we can use a selective disk backup feature, which helps you to exclude or include certain data disks for being backed up. And once again, by this, you can lower your backup costs. So also a thing of automation, these days, AVD is also used quite a lot and also being implemented a lot. And I just want to mention that another Belgium community member, Johan van der Veel, who's a board member of the Belgium Azure Virtual Desktop Azure User Group, has just written a blog post which can help you with cost savings related to your AVD setup and deployment. After the session, I will also put in that link in the chat so everybody who is interested can go check out that blog post. But for now, enough talking. Time for another demo. So let me go back to my Azure portal. So if you want to look into those Azure reservations, you can simply go to the global search bar and type it in. Let me see if I'm doing. Maybe I need to. Oops, it's like this. Just click on those reservations. Simply click on Purchase Now. And you can take a look at all those specific resources where you can purchase reservations for. This list is probably going to fill up with a lot of other PaaS offerings later on. If you want to quickly go into cost optimizations, a trick is you can also just type in cost, how to optimize cost or whatever. And specific Microsoft related docs will pop up under documentations, and you can quickly click on those. So that's also a tip. You not always need to go to your browser and open Google or Bing to look things up. You can mostly look things up from inside the Azure portal through the global search bar if you want. But let me also show something else. So at the moment, I have only two virtual machines running in my environment. One is a B series VM, and the other one is a Spot VM. So if I scroll down, you can see it's a Spot VM. It's based on capacity at the moment and the eviction policies. So if Microsoft requires that a lot more resources at the moment, they can deallocate this VM to get those extra capacity. If you want to change this setting, you need to stop down the VM because you can't change it at a running VM. So you simply wait until it's stopped. It will probably take not that long, hopefully, because it's not a that big sized VM. Let's wait until it's deallocated. Otherwise, I can first go into Azure Advisor, the thing I want to show. So if you want to use Azure Advisor, once again, type it in the global search bar or use it from your sidebar. Just click on it. Then you can see you have a specific cost recommendation. Yeah, I follow all best recommendations. The thing you should be aware of, if you just start deploying in Azure, it can take some time, up to a month, before every cost recommendations are filled in. So probably if you start deploying, there won't be cost recommendations available. And if you look into those a month later, probably there will be some. But not to get you always logging into the Azure portal, there's another way you can use. For example, you can set alerts. For example, I already created an alert, a cost optimization alert. What does this alert do? For a specific subscription, my management subscription, it will look at the cost recommendations. So if a new cost recommendation pops up, it will send me an email. So I not always need to go look into my Azure portal and open Azure Advisor to see if any recommendations. You can also do this for all other recommendations, but to make it clear, you can create a specific cost optimization alert. Also, for your IaaS VMs, cost optimizations are based on specific rules. There's a specific percentage of the CPU utilization. If you want to adjust these, just go under configuration, go to rules, click on a specific subscription, click on edit, and you can change the CPU utilization rate depending on the subscription or the workloads or VMs running in there. So also definitely customize this to your environment and usage. In the meantime, I think that specific virtual machine is stopped. So let me open it again. So if you want to change the Spot VM instance setting, just go under configuration, scroll down at the bottom. Where it is, you can see I have an Azure Spot. Now I can change the price capacity. And I can even say, there are no proximity placement groups found. So if you want to change the Azure Spot settings, stop the VM and you can save it from over here. So let me discard this for the moment. Another thing I want to show you, like I said, there are some backup optimization options. A thing you should really keep in mind is, for example, you can see I have 2 recovery services fault at the moment. You can see in this recovery service, there are some backup items already there. So some Azure virtual machines are backed. If I then want to change the specific setting for my recovery service fault, so if I want to change the storage replication type, I'm not able to. And this is because from the first time a specific resource is backed, you won't be able to change that specific replication type. So in my other vault, you can see I don't have anything backed up yet. So if I now go to properties, look into backup config, I'm able to change the storage replication type. That's also a thing you should keep in mind. Whenever you backup, keep in mind that you need to set your storage replication type before any backup is made. Let me go back to my screen and to my slide deck. So it should be scrolling now. The last part I want to talk about is how you can remain informed and in control of your costs. First of all, you should use Azure management groups to group all your different subscriptions and not only manage access and policies, but also costs. And this in an organizational environment-based or combined hierarchy. Next to that, you can also use resource tags to track resources for billing. A resource tag always exists out of a name and a value. So you can use, for example, the name cost center, and as value, you can specify the department who is responsible to pay for a specific resource at the end of the month. Next to that, Azure has also a built-in free tool named Azure Cost Management, which can help you to do cloud cost analysis by monitoring and monitoring your costs across even all your clouds, even for AWS, for example. Next, you can also use cost management labs to get a sneak peek of what is coming into cost management. And you can use it to do cost analysis and define budgets and alerts to inform you when your consumption reaches a specific threshold. By using those budget alerts, you can increase, for example, the organizational accountability, and you can create a budget for a monthly, quarterly, or annual period. You can also narrow your budget view based on subscription, resource group, or even a collection of resources. Just keep in mind that you have any pay-as-you-go, MSDN, or Visual Studio subscription. Your invoice billing period might not align with to the specific calendar month. So for those subscription types and resource groups, it's better to create a budget that's aligned to the invoice period or to calendar months. And then to be able to control your costs, you can use Azure Policy, and this to set up specific policies to implement a form of cost controls and to guardrail your environment. For example, you can set a policy which only allow you to deploy the deployment of certain VM sizes in your environment, or even restrict the creation of public IPs. You can also enforce that specific resource tag, like just one from a cost center, are always required when new resources are deployed, or even that a resource can be deployed in only certain regions, like, for example, the West Europe region. But maybe it's better to show this in a short demo. So let me go back to my Azure portal. Okay, let me close this. Let me open Azure Policy. So best is to create an initiative, copy the built-in policies and assignments, and make your own assignments, customize those, and place those all, for example, in an Azure Gov cost initiative. So they're all placed in one. But to make it easy and to show it in a demo, I created some assignments. So, for example, one of those is storage accounts should be limited by allowed SKUs. If we edit that assignment and look into it, the parameters, you can see in that specific management group, it's almost my top management group, it's my company management group. I can only use premium LRS or standard LRS for my storage accounts. So if I now want to deploy a storage account with GRS enabled, it will fail. For example, one also a lot used in environments, and especially if you're purely governance-minded, is allowed locations. So if you open that specific assignment and look into it, also into the parameters, I've selected 6. So at the moment, I can only deploy resources in West Europe, in any of the East US environments. If you can set it in audit mode, you can set it in deny mode. Best is to first of all set it in audit mode, because then you can see how many times things are not deployed like they should. Because if you start denying, maybe some developers can't deploy their resources anymore. So handle it with care if you start using policies. Also have put one in place to append a specific tag. So the thing it does, for example, is when a new resource is deployed, the cost center tag is applied, and as a default tag value, IT is set. So, and then afterwards, IT people can check out, somebody has created a new resource, it's not related to IT, and I figured it out in that way. That's a way to see that there especially is a cost center tag applied. And you have a lot more, like, for example, you don't want your VPN gateways to use a specific basic SKU. You can set that specific policy. Start using it. It can really help you to save some money and to keep in control of your environments. But let me also go into the management groups and show you how easy it is to use. opening a lot. So just type in, oh, it's not typing my A, there it is. So like you can see, I have a lot of management groups in place. And for example, for my sandboxes, underneath there is one subscription. If I click on that one, you can see under the cost management region, you can click on budgets. And like you can see, I set a specific budget. So if any of the subscriptions underneath my underneath that specific management group reaches a budget of €1,000, I will be informed. But let me quickly click on it. So it resets every month. The amount is set to €1,000. And if 75% of the budget, that's €750, is reached, I will that specific email address will get an email that the budget is almost reached. And in that way, you can keep in control of what people spend in specific subscriptions or resource groups or management groups, for example. So it's a good way to keep in control. A good tab to use also is the cost and management billing. Underneath you have the cost management. Like I said, you can use cost management for almost everything cost related. For example, you also can do a cost analysis. You can set it on the management group levels. You can specify other management groups. You can even select subscriptions. And the nice thing is, if you add an extra filter and you scroll down, you can even use those specific tags. So you can set specific tags related to cost center. Like you can see, you can select it. And then you can even do an analysis on specific departments, what are their spending in Azure and stuff like that. So it's a good way. Underneath here, you can also go to reservations, and you directly also can look into the Azure Advisor recommendations related to cost. So if you need to look into anything related to cost management in Azure, you can almost open up this blade and look in almost everything from over here. So let me also quickly show the tags, maybe. I still have a few minutes. So for example, I have some tags. Let me get the cost center tag. It's an easy way to look at it. So you see, I have two cost center tags. I have one for IT and marketing at the moment. So if I want to see which resources all belong to IT, which needs to be paid by IT, I can simply look at them through this. And if I click on the marketing one, I get all the resources that are being built to the marketing department, for example. So that's a good way to use tags in combination with cost optimization and governance. Let me go back to my slides just to go to. So before closing off, I just want to give you some key takeaways. 5 things I think you should really remember about this session. First of all, take time to make a good design. Secondly, use all free built-in Azure services and tools like Azure Advisor and Cost Management to get in control of your Azure Cloud Sp. Know that now is really the time to modernize your workloads. So when moving to Azure, try to think beyond the AIs where possible. Also, try to remain in control of your Azure environment and its costs by applying governance with Azure Policy, tax, and so on. And last but not least, especially keep an eye on your cloud spend because at the end of the month, someone still has to pay the Azure bill. So I think we still have some time for a Q&A. I don't know if some questions popped up in the chat.
There are a couple of questions.
Let me open it. There are a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. How do we find which Azure services can be paused? What does it mean? Which VMs, or what's the exact question?
Actually, it was.
It's already answered. Also, when VMs are paused, are paused costing. If VMs are deallocated, the VM itself doesn't cost any money anymore, but the managed disks are stored on storage. So the storage itself always cost something at the end of the month, even if VMs are deallocated. So that's a thing to keep in mind. You can deallocate your VMs, but it only has effect to the pricing of your VMs itself. You don't need to pay for the runtime anymore, but your managed disk or unmanaged disk in the storage account, whatever, are still being, still need to pay for those. That storage capacity needs to be paid if it's running, deallocated, or even stopped. We could turn cost by doing scale for after we have to do manually only, not through Azure Automation. Looks non-issue. Please confirm. I probably need to look in that one, but I can definitely look at it and answer it if that's okay. Because he's saying it's a known answer. It's nothing I already saw, but I can look at it. So if it's okay, yeah, I will answer that question later on. Like an open bug in Azure CLI automation using Azure Runbooks. Yeah, if it's that one and you already looked at it, yeah, maybe I can look at it and try to figure it out, or try to let someone from Microsoft look at it and answer it maybe.
One question.
Yeah.
In terms of the people who never thought that something would be costing more than they thought it would be costing, what have you seen? There's some estimated expenses when they moved things into Azure. Is there some kind of common thing you have seen, A, B, C, and D, or this stuff is costing more than you thought?
Mostly, if the thing I mostly see, and the first thing people mostly do when they migrate to Azure is they have their on-prem environment, they have some VMs running in VMware or Hyper-V, and they don't use Azure Migrate, for example, to do, first of all, an assessment of their running VMs, which is something I would do to start with. And they don't use the pricing calculator. And like I said, they do a one-to-one translation. They have a VM running on-prem. It has that many vCPUs. It has that many VM memory. And they just pick a VM size in the Azure portal and just map it to that one. And then, yeah, all the time, those VMs are oversized. And that's really, yeah, it costs a lot of money at the end of the month. Or a lot of environments, people who are not that familiar with Azure, they want to start testing it out. Yeah, let us say they want to deploy a MySQL database, for example. They just start clicking in the Azure portal, just click everything. Some things like I said, the recovery services fault by default is set to GRS, for example. But in a best practice way, GRS you only need to use for your production workloads and not for your dev test workloads, for example. All those things by default, Microsoft sets some settings. And if you're not familiar with what it means, those specific settings, it can really cost you some money at the end of the month. So I think I do a lot of cost optimization assessments. Those things pop up every time. So you have the VMs are oversized. You're not using the right licenses. Why is it not used in dev test labs? Why you have an enterprise agreement? Why are you not using the dev test subscription, for example? Do your dev test? Yeah, it really can save you some money. So the list is endless, in my opinion. I can. Like I said before, and like other people said, I think I can talk 2 hours about this. And yeah, I skipped a lot of past resources, so I hope the speaker after me will tell you more about those. But even for past resources, there are a lot of optimizations available. And for example, I know we're somewhat familiar with Azure Bastion. So Azure Bastion, with Azure Bastion, you can manage your VMs from inside the Azure portal. It's a Jumpbox as a service, like I always said. But a Bastion host has a specific price. So at the end of the month, it's around 190 euros if you keep it running the whole time. But it's a resource, you need to deploy it. But for example, you can create a script in Azure Automation If somebody needs to do some work on a specific VM, just run the script. The Bastion host is deployed. Well, it takes around 5 minutes. I wrote a script for it. It just takes 5 minutes. He can do his thing, and then he can drop off the Azure Bastion host, and that will also lower the cost of that specific Bastion host from 190 euros to maybe 70 or 60 euros. And every 60 euros or $60 you win at the end of the month, if you do that for every Azure resource we have running, if you do that 10 times, it's already $600. So you really need to look at is every resource you're using optimized related to costs, and do I really need all those specific settings? But also think of reliability. That's the thing I said. Think of your security, and it's a way of choosing the right balance, I always say. I hope that somehow answers your question.
Yeah, thank you very much, because it's things that which VMs which are running 24/7, but are idling 95% of the time. It's high experience.
It's a lot, and that's the thing I said in the Azure Advisor. You can play with that percentage of the tool, and if you then create an alert, it's quite easy to look at those things. But for example, you can also look into Azure Resource Graph. For example, at some slide I think I said there are the things I see a lot in environments is there are a lot of public IP addresses used by some resources some way ever, and it's not associated anymore to a specific resource, but a public IP address itself costs around, I think it's 90 euros. So if it's still there and not being used, and you have 10 of those, it's around 900 euros. You pay for nothing. So you can write a specific resource graph query to look at those specific unassociated public IP addresses. That's also a trick. Or to people deploy VMs and they drop the VM, but the disks stay there. All those unmanaged or managed disks stay there. You pay for them. So try to use resource graph, look at the internet, do those specific queries and look at those resources. And if you don't need them anymore and they're just sitting there, just drop them. It can really save you some money at the end of the month.
Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a lot I didn't mention, but that's what I said. I can talk about this for 2 hours and demo probably a lot more than the things I already demoed quite quickly. Hi, Martin. What do you use to do your cost optimization exercises, tools, document templates, Microsoft best practices? A lot of those things I know, and also when I create design new environments for customers, I use those enterprise scale landing zones for Microsoft, but I also already deployed some environments over the years. And I looked at Azure Advisor and the other tools and the best practices. And by doing it so much time, you see which things start popping up in the cost optimization recommendations. And then those things are already put in my designs for the next time. So it's something I built up over the years, things I came around and looked at. And this can be better optimized. And I talk a lot. I talk a lot to other people. For example, for the recovery services fault, that's the thing. I did a lot of Azure backup projects, and those things. After doing it so many times, you start. Why do you do it like this and this? And if you do it like that, it costs less money and stuff like that. So it's experience looking at the Microsoft docs, looking in the Azure Architect Center, reading a lot of blogs and following sessions, to be honest.
Guys, if you have any further questions, you can unmute and can ask directly.
Yep.
And otherwise, we have another speaker on the line. So Rahul, you're there?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Wim. Really nice session, and hope everyone got their answers. And if you have further questions, you can either email to us, or you can either ping to Wim on Twitter. He's quite active on Twitter. So yeah, I think, and I will share his previous session slide. That was also a very nice session. And if you are interested, you can just download. Please let me know if you are not able to download. And that
I
session
will.
recorded on our YouTube
I will
channel.
put those specific links I said. I will put them in the chat after, and
Sure.
the other
Thanks.
speaker can go ahead. Thanks for having me, and good luck, Rahul, with your session.
Yeah, I think maybe we can have means in upcoming days we can have one workshop with Wim on the cloud optimization. I think that it's a really interesting topic, and I think so many questions. And I think there was a question asked by Money. I think he recently migrated from on-prem to Microsoft Azure. He said he's not able to scale down. He's doing manually. I think in I'm not sure if it will be right solution if you are using any infra as a code tool. So either Terraform or Plumi, I think that you can write the conditions to, I'm not sure it will be Vim will be advice on that if you can reduce the code.
I will look at. The questions I didn't answer and answer in the chat, and the other speaker can go ahead. I think.
Oh, okay. So yeah,
If that's okay.
So our next speaker is Rahul. He is over 10 years experience. He's working in UBS India as a director. So he's certified cloud solution architect. So yeah, he'll be talking on saving the. So let's see his view on how we can save the cost on Microsoft Azure. So over to you, Rahul.
Thank you. Thank you, Wim. Thank you, everyone. And this is, I think, the first session, right? I think we covered very much of the things. Very few things left for me to cover. But I'll quickly cover a few things. I'll not take much of a time. So thanks, everyone. I work with the I work on cloud for like 7 years almost. In that journey of learning from ASM to ARM model of the migration, and then doing a couple of migration project, and then rehosting, re-architecting solution, right? Whatever the learning that I have in last couple of years, that's what I'm going to show you. So if you are able to see the screen, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to quickly show you here is the journey or life cycle of the any organization when they start their cloud or onboarding or on cloud journey, right? We all see that initially people are very much they just start on the maybe on these training subscriptions when the team is very small. It is for the a startup kind of organization, right? However, if you move to the bigger organization, they would have a EA enterprise license or agreement with the Microsoft or maybe a third party where they're consulting with, right? They will start with the sandbox development and production, right? So that's the initial flow for any organization to start with. So what the perspective that I wanted to put in here is how we can prevent couple of things before it become issues. From the cost angle perspective, right? What are the key things that we can put on the sandbox on the sandbox or development before that hit to the production from the cost angle? And if something missed it out, right, how do we monitor it and how do we optimize it? So if you see on a sandbox, right, most of the workforce that will be building a solution on a cloud would have at least a contributor access, and in a way that you see the whole workforce that is moving solutions on the cloud for any organization, you see like 70-30% of split, right? 70% or 60% of people are from the on premises background, or they are getting their hands on a Azure, and they are still learning they're going to the learning curve, right? So that's the way, and then you would have something 40 to 50% of workload. The people are from the well versed with the cloud. They understand the mechanism of the cloud. Take an example of just a VM, right? It's just, turning of the VM is just not the solution to really fully use the capacity or the flexibility of the cloud, right? When you just turn off the VM, it means that yes, stopping the VM is not really saving you the anything, right? When you really deallocate the VM, so the difference between stop and deallocate, right? And again, stopping the VM would really do nothing from the cost angle. Deallocation of the VM will save you some cost on the compute angle. However, you will still be paying for the underlying objects like your storage or public IP addresses, right? So those are the things that you need to ensure that in your learning phase or starting phase of your sandbox journey. So these are the things that you, maybe these are the couple of workshop you start with with your team, and then your dev guys who will be actively working on, right? And that culture will build across the sandbox dev and production. That way you would have a very minimal way of optimizing, instead of if that we can keep that learning in the very initial phase of your migration. What are the key couple of other things that you can put on the sandbox or development environment is very ideal ways to put restrictions enforcement on at the via the Azure policies that we have covered, right? How the Azure policies gonna help you to enforce the people to see. So a couple of examples here, right? If you see, not every organization has, or each application has a global user base. Few applications are hosted on with intranet that don't even need a internet connectivity, or it don't need to be exposed over the internet, right? Or a couple of applications, they are only catering to the specific locations. So if you identify those locations or those applications and put on restrictions on that, like yes, my XYZ applications in specific resource groups will be only hosting or only supporting to we can host on the East US to or versus Central US versus West regions, right? And as by default, as enforcement by the policies on the dev and production environment, you can make sure that no one will be able to deploy these resources in APAC region or West Europe region, which would not only ineffective for via the cost, but also a very ineffective way the latency and the architecture are the better solution, right? So that's the one of this thing that you can do. Another thing would be in a sandbox and dev environment, maybe in a dev, because you wanted to replicate the dev to the production or UAT. In a sandbox, you really don't need a storage account with the RAGRS or GRS permission, right? So that is the one of the policies that you can put in place. There are multiple other policies will really help you to optimize from the start. Along another would be in a day you don't need a very GPU intensive workload, right? You don't need VMs with EF series or very high SKUs like 64 core or 120 or 128 or 192 GB of RAM, right? So if you understand your workload initial days, and then you see like, yeah, I need this 20 kind of VMs or 10, 20 VMs SKUs people should play, and then that way you'll be able to optimize from the start of the cost. So another way would be to um, so start the ISC infrastructure as a code deployment from the day one, if possible. I know this is very hard for the new guys to just go and start ARM templates or something with the Terraform, maybe sometime easier. But from the Azure angle, the if you start with the Azure templates. So in that way, what will happen if you run your workload, you run your VMs, your PaaS services, or other things, right, in sandbox or dev, and discard at the end of the Friday business hours. And by the any CI/CD tool that you use, right, just reset up this all those environment Monday morning before the team comes in. So that way you are immediately optimizing your cost by 20 to 25%, right? So that's the one way to look at it. So that's if you start with the enforcement of from the Azure policies, learning curves, ISC deployment. That's one way to do. Same thing you will follow with the development and production, and then once you have done the sandbox level of enforcement, then you would have opportunity to go in Azure advisor way or alerting way or budgeting way to view and optimize further what are the things that further optimize. So what are the ways that you have here to optimize the cost? As we covered, right, spot pricing, which is really interesting thing, which maybe will help you to optimize cost up to 82 to 92% of general VMs, right? If you think that you have workload and you are okay to that VM to go away, if that is not very critical to you, right? And if you have the ISE way of deployment, like if even that VM goes away, you will deploy the VM in next couple of 1 or 2 minutes, right? And if that is okay to your business or your application to have that kind of eviction policy, right? You'll definitely start using the Azure pricing. The another thing is really key here, and I really wanted to highlight is not all Azure regions. If you are provisioning your VMs in East US2 versus Central US, you definitely see some spike price difference in the same VM SKU from one region to another region. So it boils down to your way of implementation, way of designing your application, the way of how where your user base is, and then wherever possible, if you see the cheapest region where you can deploy, definitely Azure, the cost optimization or costing would come later, before your real superior user experience, right? So that's the one thing. Wherever possible, choose the correct region. Another would be BYOS. That is really interesting. I think most of the enterprise customer, when they start their migration, right, they already have a tie-up or licenses with the all those Azure virtual machine, the Windows or Linux workload, right? So if you can, they start with their hybrid benefit, bring their own OS, so they definitely that way they can they'll have ability to save the licensing cost, reuse the cost there as well. The last part of this is reservation, right, which we covered, which we've covered already. So reservation is again a very interesting thing. Most of the things that you see earlier, it was only for VMs, but now it is, if you see Azure, so Azure is providing reservation to most of the services. Again, you need to verify with your EA agreement what are the SKUs are available and all those things. But currently, Azure Reservation is support most of the Azure services, databases, even the Azure ADLS, like a big storage accounts. It would support. With that way, if you go with the Azure Reservation for 1 year or 3 year, and use, you're okay to have that 1 year lock-in or 2 year lock-in, you'll definitely be able to get the 39 to I think 43% of cost optimization on your workload. There are a couple of other key things that I wanted to highlight here on the reservation is, if you take a reservation of take an example of 10 Azure virtual machine, you can scope those Azure virtual machine to your 3 different or 4 different Azure subscription or multiple Azure subscriptions. So that way, what will happen, even I have 3 virtual machine with a specific SKU in a subscription, and maybe after a couple of days or a weeks I have deleted those VMs, but my reservation will not go in a loss, because if I have the same SKU VMs in a other Azure subscription where the reservation is scope 2. So automatically the reservation scope will change to those, and then you'll get that scope will get applied to other available Azure virtual machines. So if you think that you have a 20 Azure virtual machines in your couple of Azure subscriptions, so you can purchase the Azure reservation for that specific SKU, and then it can change if that needed to. So same thing applies to other services as well. The only key thing here is, if you have to cancel the reservation, there are a couple of conditions you need to make sure. There could be some small penalty, and then there are other terms and conditions that you need to ensure. Yeah, and then just one slide before. Yeah, so this is again when you select your Azure workload, take an example of Azure Blob Storage, right? Which is very storage is very common for most of the Azure applications or workload that we are running, right? There is a way that it's not only the premium storage. Storage will cost you more. There is a way, if you properly use the storage, it may cost you less than the standard storage. So one of the use case would be, see, if you have a media or multimedia kind of application where you wanted to show the thumbnail, where the thumbnail will load first, and the actual content will load the once someone is hit on that thumbnail, right? So if you host all your thumbnails in your premium storage, and then your actual content will, if you store those content into the into a standard storage account, right? So what will happen, you're immediately, whenever someone browse your website, it immediately your thumbnails would get loaded, so that way you will have better user interface experience. And then as soon as someone will hit on that thumbnail, the file will get loaded via whatever CDN or whatever mechanism you have. So that way you can optimize the cost of storing the things, right? So if you see this, right, as you go up on the line, right, the cost of the storage on the premium goes high. However, the transaction cost of the premium is very low. If you think that you would use the standard storage account for both the things, then definitely you would not have a really better user experience, user experience, but you would have you would optimize the cost. But if you wanted to club both the things, the best way to have the understand have the combine of the solution. It's the one of the example. Yeah. Okay. What are the key things that we have to do is just before this demo, right? This thing, what I wanted to show is tell is like take an example of VMs, right? A VM is really something that everyone is using in all those all the organization who start their journey, right? They start with the lift and shift. That way they get the confidence to build the solution on cloud, and then the team get understanding of the cloud, and then they may slowly start with the refactoring and rehosting the application on the maybe PaaS, and then they move to the SaaS. So that's the traditional way of moving, I would say. So if you see VM is right, still when people have started their started their migration, they had an understanding of, yes, if we move to the cloud, we would have a very less expenses, we would have a scalability, we would have a flexibility. Yes, that's true, but that's only when you would use the cloud in a better manner. If you so there was a one survey, or there was one publication, the report that initially when the people have started, it's a 4 year back or 3 year back story. So the cost of the hosting IaaS on the IaaS VM on the on-prem was a little bit of cheaper or same hosting the VMs on the cloud. Why? Because the people, here we have one click option to scale up the VMs. People used to scale up, and without much of the understanding of the cost, how it may play it out, right? Whenever we move the VMs on the Azure or in the cloud, we need to see a data points, couple of data points, how my current application or current environment or current Azure, the VMs are currently being utilized. If it is getting utilized to 60% or 40%, why I would need the same, like I have a 8 core VM and 8 core VM and 16 GB RAM on prem. Why I would use the same thing, same SKU on a cloud, right? Whereas my on-prem VM is only being used for 40% or 80 or 60% at max. So that's thinking different that we need to make when we move on a cloud, because here we don't need to worry about the long delay of 1 or 2 minutes of getting the resources or getting the VMs provision or available. Here one click we can, if there is a demand of the workload, is that if there is a Black Friday kind of situation or such kind of situation, you can immediately scale up the environment, considering you have the ISC kind of availability. Another thing would be the traditional way of once we have VM on Azure. yeah, let's go with the first thing of optimization of the VM cost would be auto shutdown, right, which is available on the portal. You'll simply enable that. I think that is the must feature for any dev and sandbox workload. We should add it into your template as soon as you deploy the template. That one snippet should be there at the lower side of the template saying that this VM should auto shut down based on the working hours of or at least on the Friday and Saturday weekends of your of the of your team or the organization. So weekday shutdown is the key thing. I think we all should shut it down the environment is when we are not using. It is not only from the cost optimization perspective, but if you see from the environment perspective, right? There is just similar kind of calculator. I'm going to show you just in the demo side. So just like Azure pricing calculator, there is another calculator called how environment friendly you are, called Azure sustainability calculator, where it would show you if you using the VMs 100 VMs for 1 month, and then you are shutting down your VMs for let's say only weekends, how you are adding up, how you are helping the environment, right? How you're reducing the carbon footprint of your organization. So that thing is really need to be understand from the environment perspective also. So that's one way of thinking, right? So another way of optimizing on the cloud on the VM side itself, the one way is to auto shut down. Another would be to just off hour, right? You are running, you're probably working for 8 hours or 10 hours in a day, and then after like for next 14 hours, the VM shouldn't be ideal. So you should implement some way of, or just couple of commandlets on the Azure CLI, build it, compile it into your CI/CD and schedule that, right? After office hours, VM should start, and in the morning, VM should automatically start before the developer or the team gets joined. So they for them there would be there would be no difference. However, you're still saving 10 hours of or 14 hours of cost for your office. So that's the second way of it, right? So a third way of is just saving the cost on VM itself is take an example of very huge VMs like GPU VMs, right, where you have a 192 core or the big workload that you're running on it, right? So usually those VMs are very expensive, and those VMs are only needed for a couple of hours in a day. If I take an example of GPU things, right, maybe more than that. So what we can give power up the dev community, dev teams in the, who are using in the organization, right? Have a simple so have a simple code in that VM or script in that VM to auto shutdown or on demand shutdown or demand start. So as soon as someone done with their work, they're legit going on the portal and stopping the VM, right? They should have the ability to on the VM itself to stop the VM as soon as the work is done, and then when they come next day, either you have one other script on one of the VM jump node kind of thing, or let them do it from the portal, or just kind of a REST API or something like that. So that can be done. Just leverage the serverless authentication method, manage identity, or SPNs, which is a old way of doing things. And then with that, there would be three options: weekend shutdown, off-hour shutdown, and on-demand shutdown of your VM. So that way, you'll be really leveraging the cloud at the full space. So budget alerts, right? As Wim has walk us through how we can set up the budget alerts. Yeah. So one of the example of budget alerts I really wanted to highlight here is take an example of Dev subscription or production subscription, right? You have a forecasting of your environment for Dev is like you will be spending 20K on this month, or on the based on your historic calculation or bill, right? You would be setting up the alert at 80%, 90%, and 100%, right? The same budget alerts you can set it up. So that way you would have a tab on your spending, and you would avoid this shocker, right? So let's take an example. You reach with the 16,000 or 18,000, right? You would get an alert, and then no, yes, at what level you reached at, whether you reached at the 22nd day of the month or 26th day of the month, or you just reached that at the first week of the month, right? So then you would have the immediate check that yeah, there is something wrong, or is it acceptable, or your workload is really gone that huge. Then maybe it's the time to change the threshold of that budget alerts. Azure Advisor, yes, it is based on the well architecture framework, Azure well architecture framework, or any cloud well architecture framework. It has the 5 pillars. One of the key pillar of is the cost optimization. I have heard many businesses are saying that people will initially, when 10 years back, right, people were afraid of moving on a cloud because of security reason. Now people will move on a cloud because of security. However, there would be challenges of the people who, if they may not properly use the cloud, and if they have a bigger bill, they may reconsider the things, right? So so that's the bigger thing. So on the cloud, as Azure Advisor friend is really a key thing. I think everyone should leverage the Azure Advisor. It's free service. It has many recommendations. It also has the scoring. And maybe that's a good way to show your management team, right, how good you are at each pillar of your onboarding, right? Among the 5 pillar, and the first one, the important would be here to talk on the cost, right? How we are. That would be again good for your CFO to see how properly your environment is managed. um, Auto scaling, yeah, that is depending on the rules for the VMSs or many other PaaS services. You can set up rules on those, or service fabric or AKS and all those things. You will set up the auto scaling rule. That must, I think, when you mature enough to move on the PaaS and so you should understand the auto scaling, importance of auto scaling. Not all the time you would have cyber Black Friday kind of situation, or Cyber Monday kind of situation. There would be a days that you don't need huge capacity, and auto scaling would really help you in those situations. Right sizing, yes. So on the pass, right, enough on the as maybe I'll just move on the platform as a service. So not all platform as a service would really would help you to cost optimize the things, right? I think is really not a very friendly sentence. But if you see, as a learning of a couple of things I have learned on the past, right? So if you see Azure Postgres SQL, a single server, right, it runs on a container as a backend. If you run the same if you run the same workload on your VM, you would see with the 4 core and 8 GB of RAM, you would be able to absolutely run that workload without any issues. If you move on the Azure SQL server, you would have a big challenges. The way a couple of PaaS services architecture is not really meant for some workload, right? So the key thing here I wanted to highlight is, before moving blindly on a PaaS, really evaluate whether that PaaS service will really fit to you, or the current or there is a learning from the Azure side, or there is new offering coming up just on the same thing, right? The example of the Azure Postgres, there is another service coming up, is in a preview called Flex servers. So that would help a couple of issues that we see on the Azure PaaS single server. So that's one of the key things, that just don't go blind on the PaaS services. Evaluate this thing per your environment. It may be very good for someone else, but see if it really helps for you. Tagging, I cannot enough emphasize on it. It's really critical for you to understand. Until and unless you understand your costing, where you are spending, you will not be identify those gaps. So tagging each resource, and then again, this can be enforced with the Azure policies. Ensure that there is a couple of 5-10 policies that should be there on each environment, like tagging, billing, reference, or maybe auto shutdown is enabled on the template, and also and so forth. So tagging is really critical. That will help you to identify what you spend and where you spend. Another thing on the PaaS services, is not really all the services you can scale up and scale down. Okay, there are key thing. There are a couple of services that you can only scale up. You cannot scale it down. take an example of Azure Postgres again. So Azure Postgres, you cannot, if you once you provision the storage, underlying storage for this specific Azure Postgres, you will not be able to scale it down. It's only scale up. Same thing goes with the Azure Redis. There wouldn't be a way to scale it down. So make sure that you architect solution very properly. You understand your workload, and then only you. It's better to have the 100% match than 110% provisioning, right? Make sure that you have understanding of your workload and set up the provision the resources per your requirement than the over provisioning. So the first thing, moving on cloud, great. Moving on PaaS, you're just moving on that, right? But again, then see how what are the ways for you to re-architect the things, right? Is there a way that if I run on the VM, some simple one-page application, right? Is there a way that I can move that onto web app, or is there something scheduling job that I can move onto logic apps, or maybe on Azure PaaS, right? See that those opportunities from the cost optimization perspective, can we do that? That way there will not only be single, you just get rid of Azure VMs, but also there will be high availability there. If you just use a single VM in VM, there is a possibility that your VM will be down for patching. There will be a way options, possibilities that VM will be down on during the power outages and so on and so forth. So always think through ahead of time and see if there is opportunity to move on re-architect the solution. So now I'll quickly show one quick demo. I think we've covered many of the things, but there is few. Just wanted to highlight one thing. I hope you are able to see the screen. The Azure, Azure portal. Just say yes. Is it visible, guys?
Yeah, Rahul, we can see.
Okay, cool. So as we as talked about, right, the Azure policies, there are multiple definitions that we can set it up here. One of the definition that I have just configured it just to have a quick demo here. What kind of impact it would be if you see the allowed virtual machine size, VM size that we can provision, or it is allowed to provision in the specific subscription. So there are multiple ways of auditing or creating these policies, right? If you are in a lower environment, you would like to understand what are the VMs that you would see people are deploying in your environment, right? And then if there is a genuine case for GPU VMs or high SQ VM, then you might want to create another resource groups for those kind of workload and have an exception on it, right? So to do that, you need to learn and collect the data points, right? So first would be have the Azure policy in audit mode, and then there would be enforcement mode, right? What will happen in audit mode is when someone is deploying the in VM, it will not get blocked. They will be able to do the deployment. However, you would be able to see this in your dashboard saying, yes, these are the VM are non-compliant. So you can maybe you can talk to these guys. You can see is there a way that a real or genuine use case that they are using, and they if there is, then you can create the exception for them in a specific resource groups, and then allow them to utilize. So that's the one way of enforcing the policies. Another way would be so if you see, right, setting up the correct messaging on these. So as you grow in your organization, there will be hundred of policies you will be applying for each Azure services, right? Maybe public IP is not allowed, then encryption should be there, the same key should be there, there should be encryption, there should be TLS 1.0, there shouldn't be TLS 1.1, and so on and so forth. There are hundred of policies that would be get created. So as soon as you start, if you get the blocker of those policies saying that this SKU is not allowed, the message of the deny policy should be very crisp, so people can really understand and start debugging the things there. So that's what I wanted to show on the Azure policy front. Let me quickly think that's the pricing calculator. This is the sustainability calculator that I was talking to. Here you would have ability to see how what is your carbon footprint, right? This calculator is available for EA. I don't have that access, so I cannot really show it up here. But if you go to the Microsoft site and look for the EA sustainability calculator, it's in preview, and then see if there is a way. It is a great way to add support the environment cause, right? So that's that. And then one of the other thing, right, the key thing that I wanted to highlight here is like when you are in a dev or sandbox environment where the people are mixed, right, they are learning, they have learning curves and all those things. You see many resources, the people, when we see that stop the virtual machine or duplicate the virtual machine, or they would simply delete the virtual machine from the portal, right? But there would be still many objects will be lying on that specific subscription, like attached disk or IP addresses, right? That may still cost you the money. So it's really a simple way. It is provided by the Microsoft. You can simply run this script, right? I just wanted to show you here. Just set up this thing, and if I run this thing, it will show how many orphan. Okay, I think there is something wrong with, let me. So this script is nothing but just one of the example, right? There would be multiple things that you would be you'll have ability to set it up, like auto shutdown, weekday shutdown, and on-demand shutdown things. So this is the script will simply go ahead and fetch all those unattached this in your environment, and then if you set the variable to 1, it will delete all those unattached manage this from your subscription. So same thing that you can do, you can schedule this script in your CI/CD, maybe every morning or every end of the day, and then delete it. So at least on the sandbox environment. So that's all. I think most of the things we've already covered. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you, Rahul. Hey guys, if you have any further questions, so you can ask or you can put in the chat box. I have, Rahul, few questions. I'm not sure if, because Vim has already covered a few things. I just want to ask that is there any tool, for suppose if your organization is using a hybrid cloud environment, like maybe Azure and AWS both, so is there any tool or to do the cost comparison between the Azure services and AWS services both? Maybe came across like anything on this? No. Okay, no, that's fine. I think is there means like means in Microsoft Azure Advisor, it's like suppose if you have done the design and you are going to provision services, okay, and you want to know the cost before provisioning. So it's like we use the Microsoft calculator, okay, but is there any other way to do the things like to get the projection, like if this will be the my cost, the expected cost, and in advisor if you can advise, means like if we get any advice, like we can use the VM of like the size of the VM and all those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? I think if you do this via Terraform or Azure ARM or recently Bicep, right, there is an opportunity for you to see there are a couple of plugins. I think the open source plugins. I don't have the name of the plugin yet really, but that plugin will really help you to whatever it will understand the code, and then before you actually deploy your resources in Azure, it will show you the cost of it, right? So you have a template, your 10 template you're deploying, right? It will show you this 10 template will cost you this much. Again, this information that plugin is again pulling from the public calculator only. But yeah, you would have the same view itself, just like what if kind of situation, right? Or what if or plan you would see on the.
Rahul, I think your VM is stuck, maybe.
Hello.
Yeah. So you mean? I think we lost the connection. Maybe I think he will join again.
Hey, am I?
Yeah. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So there is a way to do that using the ARM templates or Bicep or the Terraform. You can just
Yeah.
add the plugins and
Okay.
you'll
So
be
if
able
it,
to see the forecasting.
because Bicep, as I understand, the Bicep, Terraform, all these are infrared as a code tool. So yeah, how will know the cost? So is there any tool or plugin to provide the cost using means like Terraform plan or means Azure templates?
Yeah, there's tool. Let me quickly get the tool for you. There is a plugin that you can use in the Terraform itself that will show you the cost beforehand.
Okay, means like is in Microsoft Azure Advisor there is anything means which can suggest that if you use like the VM size, of
Mhm,
2 cores or 4 cores, so like you will save the more cost or like
mhm, mhm.
based on your
Yeah.
usage.
Yeah, so definitely. So if you have a huge, let me show that, right? I'll quickly share a screen also here. This the. Yeah. So if you see it right under the recommendation, you would be able to see. I don't have much of the things provision here, but it will reflect on the scope, whatever the scope that you selected, right? You will be able to you'll be getting a recommendations on this side. You'll see all those recommendation listed here after 24 hours if you have the workload deployed there. Based on the configuration that Vim has shown up here, right? If you set subscription if the average CPU utilization of your workload is just 10%, right? And then you would see all the recommendations showing up in the all the recommendations. And then it will also show you if you resize to XYZ side, what it will recommend you. So now you are running on 16 core, right? If you recommend, it will recommend you resize to 8 core or so. So that will happen. That happen here.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Rahul. You guys, if you have any further questions, so you can ask or yeah. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining today. Thanks Rahul for a nice session. And so guys, I think VM have already shared a couple of links, and he has shared his, I think, GitHub as well. This session will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you are interested, you can take a look later on. And yeah, thanks for joining today. We have our next upcoming session on 16th of September. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do. It is already announced on our meetup.com. This session is on Terraform and Kubernetes. So if you're interested, please join. Thank you again for joining today.
Thank you, everyone.